There was a little girl called Zainab. She was 7 months old. She looked like she was a newborn. You could see every little bone of her facial skeleton, her ribs and everything. The reason she was dying, and of course the Israelis, were not only refusing to allow any aid to come in, but were taking bottles of formula feed out of doctors' luggage so they couldn't be used to save these children's lives. I mean, absolutely deliberate. A packet of cigarettes in Gaza at the moment costs $400 US. Why are we suddenly seeing a lot in the news now? Doctors and nurses who were talking about this, I was talking about it in January 2024. It was about clearing all Gazans out of Palestine. They want the world to be able to see Gazans walking out of Gaza. They've destroyed the whole infrastructure of living in order to make the Gazans want to leave. And they're achieving that.
The Karima Academy is an online learning platform that helps Muslims who want to learn more about Islam. We do this by providing structured courses and weekly live classes on essential Islamic knowledge. If you're someone who wants to learn but you're not sure where to begin, the Academy gives you a simple step-by-step way to start learning Islam properly. You can start learning completely free with just 30 minutes a week by signing up for your 7-day free trial with no commitment. Inside the Academy, you'll find clear and well-structured courses on topics like how to pray, the life of the Prophet ﷺ, belief, Islamic history and more. Whether you're a beginner wanting to learn the basics or someone returning to Islamic learning, everything is laid out to help you stay consistent. The Karima Academy was built for you. Click below to start your free trial and take the first proper step to becoming a better Muslim.
This is probably the most difficult conversation we've ever recorded here at the Karima Foundation podcast. It's a nearly 2 hours deep dive into Gaza and the horrors that Professor Nick Maynard saw there. It's probably one of the most extensive accounts any doctor has ever given of what they saw there. And I'm warning you, to be honest, it's a very harrowing account. It will pierce the depths of your soul. It will leave you in a way changed from the person you were before it started. But it's important that these conversations happen. You have to listen to this. Do not ignore it. Share it. Make sure everyone in your family watches it. Make sure all your friends watch and listen to this. And then do whatever you can to make a difference. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalam ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Peace be upon all of you, our viewers, for this new edition of the Karima Foundation podcast. I'm here with, I brought my elder brother Asim.
Brother Asim.
Yes, as opposed to other
Maulana Asim, okay.
Partly because of the nature of today's conversation, because I didn't really want to do it alone. I attended this presentation Professor Nick Maynard gave at the Oxmoor Farm, I think it's called, and it was a very difficult experience to sit through, and I felt it'd be very difficult for me to try to carry out this conversation alone, so I brought him over for moral support, and I think he'll ask some insightful questions as well. I think one of the things that's happened as time has gone on since October the 7th is that Muslims and non-Muslims have become sort of desensitized. They don't want to look at the pictures anymore. They'd maybe pretend like nothing's really happening. And for me, in the last few months, I've made it a conscious effort to go look at the images and really read what I need to read and watch what I need to watch, to just remind me that this is still ongoing, to make sure we don't forget that this is happening, and to carry on doing whatever we can to bring a stop to this. And that's today's conversation. The whole point of that for me is this, for our community. And also, I'm hoping, Allah Ta'ala will be able to do this as well. In the description of today's video of this podcast, we'll have a donation link for medical aid for Palestinians, so that everybody who watches this is going to be a constant theme, like it was in your talk, that will keep reminding people to donate towards medical aid for Palestinians, which is the organization under whose auspices you went to Gaza. My guest today is Professor Nick Maynard. Thank you so much for joining us today. What I thought would be a good place for you to start, see, normally we do icebreakers and things and it's all a bit fun, but it's just going to be a more difficult, more serious conversation for us. I think a good place to start is, who are you in the UK? Because I think the idea that you're a doctor who went to Gaza is quite remarkable, and that's the story that's going to unfold in tonight's conversation. But at the same time, you come from a certain background, your day-to-day life is not Gaza, it's quite different. So I was just wondering if you could just start off by explaining who you are and what you do yourself before we move on to Gaza and other conversations.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for inviting me. It's really lovely to be back here again. We worked out it was probably over a year when I was last here, but I remember that evening with great fondness, and the hospitality and the kindness you all showed me. So it's really lovely to catch up again. I'm a consultant surgeon in Oxford. My specialty is upper gastrointestinal surgery, and that really is surgery to the esophagus and the stomach. So my main thing is cancer of the esophagus and the stomach, and also a lot of keyhole surgery for non-cancerous conditions of the esophagus and the stomach. And I was appointed as a consultant in Oxford 28 years ago now, in 1997. And I was appointed to set up a service for esophageal and stomach cancer, because virtually none of it was being done at the time. So I set this whole unit up
in the whole city of Oxford.
In the whole city of Oxford, indeed, in the whole. I've set up this centre. I set up a centre. We take all the work for this area as well: Wickham, Stoke Mandeville, Swindon, Reading, Milton Keynes, all the surrounding counties. And in all those different counties, a very small amount of this sort of surgery was being done. But I was appointed to set it all up and to centralise it. So that's been something I've spent a lot of time doing over 28 years. And we've now got a big unit. We've got one of the biggest units in the country. Great outcomes, and the outcomes from esophageal cancer, for example, have improved massively in the last 30 years.
Do you teach at the University of Oxford as well?
I do. So I'm
because the idea here is to compare this, what you're describing, to what you're going to talk about.
So absolutely, because I've had a big teaching role in Gaza as well, as you know. So I've always taught medical students in Oxford, but I teach junior surgeons. I train them in this sort of surgery, and I'm a lecturer at Corpus Christi College. So I've been heavily involved with teaching students there for many years, and indeed interviewing for medical school entry. So right from interviewing people at school still to get into medical school. So that's been a really enjoyable part of my life. And Oxford's been a fantastic place to work, because you get the wonderful interactions with the students and everything like that, and the close links with the university are brilliant. I'm not a researcher, but I've set up big research programs for people to lead on in our unit. But the links with the university has made it a very strong, and has been a great opportunity to build up this terrific centre we have now.
Did you study at Oxford yourself?
I did. I studied a long time ago now. So I did the first part of my medical training in Oxford, then I went down to Guy's Hospital in London. So
your whole life has really been Oxford?
Well, I was a student here, and then I went down to London probably for 20.
Is Guy's King's College, is that linked?
Well, it is now, absolutely. It's joined up with, so Guy's, St Thomas's and King's have all joined up. They're now one medical school. In my day, and it shows how old I am, they were completely separate medical schools. So I went to Guy's to finish my medical studies, and then did all my surgical training there. So it was probably about another 10, 15 years before I came back to Oxford. But clearly I've been here now for nearly 30 years.
So the point of this is just to say that you've spent your life in elite institutions, in these sort of very hallowed places.
And working in hospitals where, we hear a lot about the difficulties of the NHS, but let's face it, when I do these big intricate operations in Oxford, we have all the equipment we need. Lots of very specialist equipment, and it makes these operations much easier. And then you go and do these operations in Gaza, and it's chalk and cheese, and you have to learn how to do things without all these special instruments that we use now. So the contrasts are vast.
So let's now talk about Gaza. You obviously have just come back from a 4-week stint in Gaza. I think we'll touch on that in a short while. Maybe a good place to start is your introduction to the world of Gaza. You first went to Gaza you spoke about the West Bank. Maybe you could just talk about your Palestinian.
I think it was 2005. So I started as a consultant in 1997. By 2005, I'd built a big unit up. And I've always been interested in doing different things, always been interested in travelling. I'd always take opportunity to travel teach abroad, all those sort of things. And a retired colleague of mine had, through a contact, was asked to go out and do some teaching in the West Bank medical schools. So he asked me to go with him. So I went with him. I think 4 or 5 of us went that first trip, and we taught at Al Quds Medical School in Abu Dis. We taught in the hospitals in Al Makasset Hospital in East Jerusalem, in Hebron, Ramallah. And we had a week over there, and it was just fantastic. And it was my first introduction there. I learned a lot about the history of Jerusalem and Palestine, and just was blown away by the beauty of it, but also the tragedy of it. And I witnessed going through the checkpoints in the West Bank, the brutal way that the Palestinians were treated by the Israeli soldiers at the checkpoints, the humiliation they went through on a daily basis, and it really struck home with me. So that was my first trip. I started reading a lot about it then. I discovered this amazing bookshop in East Jerusalem. It's part of the American Colony Hotel, which is just fantastic. And I go there religiously every time I go to Jerusalem, buy a book. So I started reading about it, and went back the next year and the next year.
When you say reading about, you mean the history or the
about
politics?
the history,
Okay.
and the history and the politics of the region. So I guess the history predominantly since 1948. I have actually read a fair bit before then, but at that stage I really learned about the post-Nakba history of the whole area. And we started going every year.
This is to the West Bank.
To the West Bank. And then in 2010, someone out there said, do you want to do it in Gaza as well? And I'd learned a lot about Gaza. And I remember being in the West Bank in 2008 during the massive military assault there. And I remember reading in the English Palestinian newspapers there, and then reading in the British press back home, and the almost unrecognisably different versions of what was going on. And that was my
of
first,
things you were seeing with your own eyes.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And that was when I thought, God, media really aren't reporting this accurately. And so then someone said 2 years later, do you want to go into Gaza? I said, absolutely. I was really interested in going. And I went to Gaza in 2010 for the first time. My love affair with all things Palestinian grew and grew. But the Gaza in particular, and I met people there who have become, in that first year I got photographs of me meeting people who've become lifelong friends. And of course, all the tragic sentiments I could see when I was in the West Bank were just magnified massively because of the occupation of Gaza and the appalling way they were treated. So I thought, this is something I really want to carry on doing. And I then sort of took over the organisation of this teaching trip. And
who was this with?
So basically every year since then, except for COVID, and clearly not since 2023, I take a team of doctors predominantly from Oxford.
Is this MAP or
no? This is separate to MAP. This is before Professor I got involved in MAP. Yeah. This is something that a retired colleague started doing. He's the one that first took me out, and I took over from him. He very sadly passed away quite a few years ago. So I take a team of Oxford doctors. Some of them have left Oxford, but they all have their origins in Oxford, and they're a mixture of surgeons, physicians, obstetricians, paediatricians, and we go to Gaza every year to teach medical students at the Islamic University of Gaza and at Al-Azhar University of Gaza, and we teach medical students. And we have varies up to 12 people at a time, go out there for 10 days, have a fantastic time. All of us fall in love with Gaza. We keep going back. I had a growing team wanting to go. You know, we had our flights booked to go in November 2023, but of course that was cancelled. So that's been something we've done every year. Complete, and it's interesting talking to you earlier about the teaching I do in Oxford, because I've loved teaching all my life. I really have. It's been a major part of my job. The Gazan medical students and the West Bank medical students, the medical students are just fantastic, and they're every bit as bright. Right. Every bit as bright as the students I see in Oxford. Absolutely. They're probably brighter. and they certainly work harder. They are fantastically impressive, really impressive bunch of students. So I've loved that. And it's been a real highlight of our years. And I got to know Matt because I met Matt people out there. They actually helped us get our permits to get in. And then in recent years, the last 5 years or so, I've become much more involved with MAP. I've been going out with MAP to help develop cancer surgery services. That's what I do, cancer surgery. I have been involved going out carrying out and teaching cancer surgery. The whole MAP philosophy is not just to go in and do a big operation and go away again, because then you benefit one person. The MAP philosophy, which is such a wonderful philosophy, is transference of knowledge, transference of skills. So we go in there, and rather than me just doing a big operation, I teach them how to do it.
To do the big operation.
I teach them how to do it so they can carry on doing it. And even more importantly than that, we help them develop a really efficient organisation of their cancer services. The advantages of multidisciplinary working, different specialists working together, and we've helped introduce all of that.
Was this at the Turkish hospital?
Well, so that's a very, very good point, because the almost like the sort of culmination of this, the real pinnacle of the changes they'd made, the incredible developments they were making in cancer treatment. They'd built a standalone cancer hospital, the Turkish cancer hospital. I cannot overstate what a massive step that was for Gaza. The recognition that we should centralise cancer treatment. They had plans to build linear accelerators there for radiotherapy. It was just fantastic. And of course, it's been destroyed. And as you saw in that talk the other day, it's been bombed to smithereens. So deeply tragic.
I was going to say, I'm just conscious that we're going to end up going, there's not sort of a linear conversation that we can have, but I'm just really interested in just the way that you were talking about the medical students and really falling in love with Gaza and all things Gazan and all things Palestinian. What was it in particular about the students that you felt was that just differentiated the students over there compared to the students? Because again, they're super bright students here. Obviously you're teaching at Oxford, so they're not.
Don't want to offend the Oxford.
Yeah, exactly.
No, absolutely. Probably listens. How dare you say that?
But there feels like there's something else. And again, again, what you were saying about the just falling in love. What was it that made you fall in love? What was it about the place, the people?
I think because
the
life
character
is so tough for them.
Mm-hmm.
Come back to the medical students. It is so tough for them. It is so difficult for them. And they all feel this incredible responsibility to help their country, to learn to be doctors, to give back to their country, to help Gaza, which has had so many obstacles over the years. So their work ethic is second to none. Their desperation to succeed, their desperation to learn is just remarkable. And in my trips in Gaza in the last year, when there's been bombs raining down around us, you can hardly hear yourself think for the machine gun fire you can hear going on around you. There are medical students in there studying, learning. 3 weeks ago, I was in there running an exam for the fourth year medical students, the OSCE exams. And I know the university, the deans very well, and they said, "Will you do one?" And I said, "Of course I will." So I spent the whole of our morning. I told my colleagues, "I can't operate this morning. I'm doing this." So we ran these exams for the medical students
in malnutrition. And
it was sort of, I was running it was a trauma station. So it was an exam, a practical exam, getting them to talk me through how they'd treat a severely injured bomb victim. And everyone did it. But these students, every single one of them was living in a tent. Every single one. No running water, no electricity, nothing. Every single one living in a tent. Every single one of them came in with beautifully clean, beautifully ironed clothes, really smart clothes, just presenting themselves impeccably. And I can tell you, their scores in that exam, I gave 75% of them top marks. They didn't put a foot wrong. Every single one of them passed with flying colours. That it was one of the most impressive things I've ever seen. And they're doing this in the middle of a war zone. Every single one of them has had family or close friends killed. That's how appalling life is for them. And yet they know they want to help their country. They want to qualify as doctors to help them. So they're remarkable people.
You've gone to Gaza twice since October 7th, I think,
Three.
right?
Three times, yeah.
One was the time when we interviewed you. When you came, how many times?
So I think when you interviewed, I'd been there once.
You'd already been there. That was between the first. Yeah.
Yeah, that was
You've
was the
been
very, very first EMT to go in there. I went in again last summer and early last summer, and then I've just been in again now.
So I was thinking, one of the things that the Israelis are adamant about is they don't want people to provide aerial footage. I think this was a condition they placed on Western
on the aid,
news services, that if you go in, you're not allowed to show the aerial footage of what Gaza looks like now, because they want to obviously hide the devastation that they've caused. Could you tell us what Gaza was like before?
Before and now. So before October the 7th.
Let's just talk about before. What was like, because right now, because I think a lot of people have seen what Gaza is now.
So Gaza, and that's why that talk you about the other day, I do talk a bit about what Gaza was like before, what I call normal Gaza. It's not normal, but it's what people were used to. It's a beautiful country. I mean, there's a lot of poverty there, a huge amount of poverty there. There's a lot of refugee camps. There are lots of people living in, there's one refugee camp, the beach camp, literally on the beach, where people were living they'd constructed homes out of old fridges, for example. I've got photos of that from previous visits. So there's immense poverty there, but there are people who led a very, very good lives there as well. But the overriding thing is it was a peaceful. I mean, that might sound odd to say that, but it was a peaceful place. I wouldn't say there was no crime, but there was very, very little crime there. Certainly nothing that I ever witnessed. And they were happy. I mean, they enjoyed themselves. They ate well. We ate well.
They fed you well.
They fed me well. I put on weight and got told off by my wife every time I got home. So it was a beautiful place. I mean, the coastline is stunning, hence why appalling American presidents have said they want to turn it into a Riviera. But it is a beautiful coastline. And it was a very friendly country. And we can talk about the physical attributes of the land, but the people were just beautiful. Just, there's no other word. Beautiful people. Friendly, resilient, resourceful, generous, profoundly generous, loving. So many close friends.
Have you travelled much over the world and things?
Yeah, I have. I mean, I haven't. Yes, I have. I mean, I've travelled around South America when I was much younger. States. I lived in Australia for a year and a half. So yes, I have travelled a lot.
So you're saying comparative to other places you've been to, they stand out so much more.
Absolutely.
The generosity is one I've heard other doctors.
And I was just going to say, because you mentioned earlier that there's incredible difficulty and hardship even before, and that could quite easily make someone quite thick-skinned, quite hard-nosed, and quite difficult. But actually, it seems that almost pushed people to say, "I want to give back."
Yeah.
And part of that giving back is the generosity, is the humbleness and the humility and the resourcefulness and all those other things that came with it.
And it's I'm not a religious man, but a lot of it is to do with their Muslim faith, and I've learned a lot over the last 2 years from visiting people like you and other Muslim communities, and the wonderful generosity of spirit, and I've noticed that so much, and it's been such a beautiful thing to learn about, and that is really there in Gaza,
One of the defining characteristics of our Prophet, peace be upon him, is that he was the most generous of people.
Yeah.
That even if he didn't have anything, he'd give them a kind word, or whatever he had, he'd give to people. And I think the people, because Gaza has a link to our tradition. We believe that the great grandfather of the Prophet is buried in Gaza. That's actually a Muslim
Really?
belief.
I didn't know that.
One of the names of Gaza is Ghazatu Hashim, the Gaza of Hashim, and Hashim is the great grandfather of the
I
Prophet,
didn't know that.
peace be upon him. So it's a very powerful place for us spiritually as well.
Well, they are. I mean, they are the most wonderfully generous. I was there in May 2023, doing a load of cancer surgery out there, and we got caught up in a massive aerial bombardment. It was the biggest aerial bombardment they'd had for several years, for 2 or 3 years, and the whole country was locked down. We couldn't go to the hospital. No one on the streets at all, and that's saying something at Gaza because the streets are packed. And we ended up being evacuated by the United Nations.
The streets were packed because it's so tightly populated.
Normally, yeah, because it's the most densely populated country in the world. So there's people everywhere. Everyone was there. No one was allowed out at all. And we ended up being evacuated by the United Nations. But during those 4 days we were incarcerated in the hotel, we witnessed non-stop bombing the whole time. We witnessed the Israeli Air Force bombing. We witnessed Islamic Jihad. It wasn't Hamas then, it was Islamic Jihad sending rockets. We witnessed the Iron Dome. But my Gazan friends kept ringing up on our and say, we're checking out, we want to check you're all right. We're worried about you. I said, what do you mean you're worried about me? I'm going to get out of here. I'm not the one. It's you're the ones who are being bombed. But it was always, we're worried about you. We're worried about you.
The hospitality.
And they're unbelievably generous of spirit, everything.
You spoke of Gaza as normal Gaza. Normal Gaza is not very normal. Could you maybe talk about what were the restrictions? Because there's always this narrative, and I'm going to tiptoe on political terrain a little bit, but just to say that people say, well, in 2005, Israel gave Gaza back, and then there was the elections and blah, 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 blah. And there's this idea that Gaza was this autonomous region living in complete and utter freedom.
It's all lies. Yeah, it's all lies. We know that. I mean, the borders have been completely closed since that time. 99% plus of the population have never been able to leave. There were, if you were rich enough, if you had enough money, you could bribe your way out through Rafah into Egypt, but that was available to very small minority. So the borders were closed. The economy was almost completely disabled and completely under the control of the Israelis. The Israelis controlled everything going in, everything going out. They controlled everyone going in, going out. If they wanted to stop the electricity, they stopped the electricity. There were power cuts all the time. There was, we hear about malnutrition now. We hear about water insecurity, food insecurity, fuel insecurity. That all existed before. There was insecurity about everything. I've been there when there's power cuts, so there's electricity only for 2 hours a day. If people had a medical condition that couldn't be treated in Gaza, so for example, there was no radiotherapy out there. So anyone who needed radiotherapy, you had to apply to get out, and you had to apply to the Israeli authorities. And 1 in 3 of those requests were refused. And the average time it took to approve a request was 2 months. So if you had a brain tumour, you had to wait 2 months to get it approved. That brain tumour would grow. 1 in 3 people were refused exits. And even if it was agreed, 2/3 of them had to go alone, couldn't go with families. So a 4-year-old girl or boy with a brain tumour needing radiotherapy may be sent out by themselves if they got permission to go. So this notion that Gaza was a free country and they messed it all up because they let Hamas take over, it is pure fabrication. They've been prisoners in a prison, call it what you like, prison concentration camp for decades.
And the electricity that you're talking about, sometimes if it was 2 hours a day or whatever, that wasn't a load shedding. That was specifically Israel turning the switch off.
Absolutely, yeah. They controlled everything,
reason
and
they decided.
So there's been no electricity going in there at all for 22 months now.
Is load shedding a term most people are familiar with? We're familiar with it because it's a Pakistan problem.
I think
because the electricity.
I experienced it when I was in Pakistan last year for the first time, but yeah.
Oh, yeah. So load shedding is just the electricity turning off in Pakistan.
It's just turning off because There's too many people using it. I
No,
suppose,
it's all
or
controlled
something,
by
but
Israel.
I was
They
gonna-
controlled.
but the point
everything that
being, it
goes
was
in.
a distinction of it's actually controlled. It's not an infrastructure issue. It's
No.
not anything else. It's
It's
specifically
Israel
turning the switch off.
controlling what goes in.
The other thing that Israel would do every now and then is what some people call mowing the lawn. So the reason I'm going to bring it here, the reason why we haven't started yet on your 4-week stint most recently, is because I really want to set the scene to just give this distinction between then and now. Even as bad as things were then, now we've entered this whole new domain of horrific hell. So you must have been, I think you said you were there for Cast
You said you were there in 2008, so that was...
No, I was
That
on
was
the
West
West
Bank.
Bank in
2008.
2014, I think you
So
were
I
there.
wasn't there during Operation Protect and Edge, which was
Protect.
I was there immediately afterwards. We tried to get in during it and couldn't get in, so we went in afterwards. So I have never been to Gaza in all those years without witnessing with my own eyes aerial bombardments.
Mm-hmm.
So every single trip I've ever been to Gaza, I've been there when there's been air raids and aerial bombardments. So, and some, it's a way of life. It's normal Gaza. It's normal Gaza. There've clearly been these periodic, massive military assaults that we also know much about, but lasting days, a month or two. Clearly nothing compared to this. But, and as you say, mowing the lawn. And this has been the impression I've had all these years, and I believe this is exactly what's been happening, is that they have been deliberately going in and provoking, wanting to get the Gazans to rise up.
You spoke, one of the interesting things you mentioned, I think it was in 2023, before May when you went, you spoke about you saw the level of precision.
Yeah.
Could you speak on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I was there in May 2023, and I was stuck in this hotel with a mate of mine with the two surgeons who'd gone out, and there was a few other sort of people from the West who were there, aid workers and things, and we could do nothing. We were sitting there, but we had a good view. There was a balcony, and we could see all this bombing going on, and the air raids and the rockets and the Iron Dome. But what we did see, what we witnessed with our own eyes, was how sophisticated the targeting of the Israeli aerial bombardment could be. So they were taking out single floors, even single rooms, where they had a target, where they knew someone they wanted to bomb was. So we could see how targeted they could do it, how sophisticated things were. And of course there was some collateral damage, but I mean, it was very, very targeted.
You said it was like floors they would target.
Yeah,
a specific
sometimes
floor.
single rooms in floors, or at the very least single floors, so that the amount of collateral damage was relatively little. And then you roll forward 6 months, 5 months, and I've witnessed, again with my own eyes, indiscriminate destruction of buildings, settlements, camps, whole towns. And you asked me earlier, what's it like driving through Gaza? On our way out, we went quite far north, just south of Gaza City. It looked like a sort of dystopian post-apocalyptic land where it reminded me of the Mad Max films. I don't know if you ever saw them, but
They've remade them recently.
yeah. So that sort of landscape, I tell you, it was in the south. It's bad, but in the north, it's something else. So it's been completely destroyed, and this notion that they are protecting civilians, that they're the most moral army in the world, that they've been only targeting Hamas. I mean, it really has no credibility at all, those statements. We've all seen, the world's seen the mass destruction they've leveled on that country with no care at all about who they've killed. And, we'll talk about this, I know, but 70% of the people who've been killed are women and children. 70% of the people I've treated and operated on have been women and children.
And again, I'm sorry, for maybe slightly weird or odd questions, but what's the feeling that you had when you saw that? I mean, you talked about, this vast sort of dystopian landscape, and where are the people first and foremost? Like, where are they? Because there's this conversation about, Hamas tried to, Israel have said, move away or whatever,
Safe
and then there were all
zones,
sort of safe zones and things like that. But there were a lot of people that we know that stayed. Are they still there? Are they still trying to survive? Are they all now concentrated in specific places? But also, in particular, like, what were your sort of feelings, and what's the atmosphere like there as well?
So in the red zones, the areas that are either occupied by the soldiers, where the ground forces actually are, or at least under Israeli control, there are still some people living, but few. Okay. But there are some people living, and we saw a scattering of people there. I mean, there are still Bedouins living there. There are some Bedouins, particularly in the eastern part in the red zone, and they will all be living under threat of being killed if they get seen by Israeli soldiers. There are a lot of, I don't know a lot, but there are some sort of, I don't know, gangs is the right word, but there are sort of gangs of criminals who are looting the very few food trucks there are, and there have been a lot of stories about them being hijacked and the food stolen. And
propped up by Israel potentially as well.
Oh, absolutely. So that we witnessed at one point a huge gunfight in the hospital between the Al-Shabaab family, which is one of the most notorious families, and the hospital security people. There was gunfights within meters of us. I mean, it was horrible. But absolutely, so I learned a lot about all of that, and everyone was saying these people are being propped up by the Israeli government to foment discord and unrest and rioting and everything like that. So when we were in these sort of, when we were in this dystopian apocalyptic life, there were a few of those people around that we could see. But most of the people we saw we were in the hospital. We weren't allowed to leave the hospital. It was too dangerous to leave the hospital. So we saw vast numbers of people living in the grounds of the hospital in the most appalling poverty and poverty. And of course, on this occasion, they're all starving. I mean, they're devoting almost every single second of their waking hours trying to find food. They're hungry the whole time.
Because that's part of the conversation about why they're going to these aid places, because
if they know
they're going to potentially be under,
because they are. Because they're so profoundly hungry. I mean, that's all I can think. I worked with people. I worked with an anaesthetist one day who went out between operations to go there because he was starving. His family was starving. His wife and kids had no food for 3 days. And he was coming into work doing a 24-hour shift without any food. And he went out between operations to one of the GHF sites to get food, came back with cuts, bruises, grazes, everything.
That's just from other Palestinians.
Yeah, it's from other people fighting. Because these food stops, they're set up as death traps. I didn't see them, but I saw photographs of them that friends had taken. I had them described to me in great detail. They're sort of compounds with food. So a typical one, food for about 300 people in them, and they wait until there's about 3,000 or 4,000 Gazans outside. So 10 times the amount of people than the amount of food there is, if you see what I mean. And then there's a single gate into the compound, and they open a narrow gate, and these thousands of people trying to get there, including gang, people like the Al-Shabaab family
and stuff,
who are trying to steal the food to then sell it. So there's a lot of rioting, there's a lot of fighting, and there is fighting amongst the Palestinians, and then there's Israeli soldiers shooting them and quadcopters shooting them.
When do they start shooting? Is it like, I'm just trying to think, do they have like a routine? Is there like,
I don't know. Okay. I mean, I wasn't there. I saw the results of those shootings. I saw the dead bodies coming, and I saw the young teenage boys, as I described the other night, with these appalling injuries. And they all told me the same story. Everyone, the victims, the families, my colleagues had been there. talked about how the Israeli soldiers were shooting them as the rioting was getting bad. The exact time frame I don't know, but
We've had the American soldier who's given testimony now. I forget his name. I think
I heard. Yeah.
the Hispanic soldier of the young boy Amir, who he says came, took the food, kissed his hand, and then he got shot not shortly after. But he says that it's just, even the American soldiers, it's just indiscriminate shooting at anybody.
He had video evidence as well.
Oh, okay.
Where he said, I think one of them shot, and he said, "Oh, you got him. Yeah, boy, you got him."
Celebrating.
Yeah, kind of celebrating.
Which is another point we'll come to, because one of the reasons your testimony recently has picked up is this idea of the target practice,
targeting.
and the games people are playing and stuff. I just want to stay on this topic of atmosphere for a second. Tom Fletcher, who we spoke about before, the UN humanitarian aid, he has a very long-winded title, but I think he's like the Under Secretary General of humanitarian aid. He spoke of, you go into Gaza, and I don't even know how long he was there for, because you did 4 weeks, and I think most doctors, do they do 4 weeks? Is 4 weeks like a normal stint?
No, so most do 2 to 3 weeks. Recently, since the ceasefire broke, most people are doing 4 weeks. They've now reduced it to 3 weeks. So 4 weeks is a long time.
Yeah. So he did like a short stint. He comes through, and I saw him on Zatea with Mehdi Hassan, and he's saying, you can smell death, and all you can hear is death, which is like the desolate silence of the absence of human life. And I don't know what the smell of death is. I mean, that's something we can ask you. But then he also, a few people have said as they come in, the first thing you see is the dogs eating human corpses. I don't know if that's something so what, could you give us some sort of reflection as you're entering this third time after?
Yeah, I didn't see that, although I've heard people who have seen that. So we came in through Kisafim and came right through the red zone.
After this long-winded process.
Journey. It was just, the destruction was massive. I remember the first time I came in December 2023, you could see this sort of, as you're approaching it from Egyptian Rafah, you just saw this, beautiful clear sky, sun. There was just this smoke lying all over southern Gaza from all the bombs, and you could hear the bombs going. And this time we came in, we could hear the bombs going off there. It was just this, as you described, there was silence, just this absolute desolation. We saw a couple of Bedouins who were sort of moving around. We saw one boy with a herd of goats. It was such a strange thing to see. But otherwise, it was just mass destruction everywhere we went. I didn't see. I've heard stories about dogs eating dead bodies. We didn't see that. We went,
What does it smell like?
It smells as a mixture of. You can smell this smoke the whole time of explosions. The main smell I remember is a smell in the hospital, which there is a smell of death. There's a smell of infection. You go on the wards, you just have this slightly putrid smell of infection everywhere. And of course, there is infection everywhere, and you can just smell it. And sometimes in the operating theatres, particularly if you've got burnt victims, this really powerful smell of burnt flesh was just horrible. Just horrible.
Before we talk about your experience in the hospitals and things, there's obviously a process of getting into Gaza. One of the things that was very difficult for me to hear from you, because we've got a 10-month-old baby at the moment, was the fact that when people were coming in, one of the things they take off you is baby formula. And that is causing, I think, the majority of the malnutrition deaths are babies so far? Is that?
No, I wouldn't. No, not the majority, but there are babies.
A large percent.
There are certainly babies and children dying of malnutrition. And yeah, when I arrived, I think on something on my third day, I went up to the paediatric unit. I subsequently had patients on the paediatric unit who I'd operated on, but at that time I didn't. But I wanted to see, because I'd heard about the malnutrition. So I went up there, and they were telling me that just in the preceding week or two, they had 4 newborn babies die of malnutrition. Their mothers couldn't breastfeed because they were so malnourished, and they didn't have any formula feed. They'd had no formula feed, which is a special type of feed to replace breast milk. They'd had none delivered for months since the ceasefire, and they had a very small amount of formula feed for older children, for infants, but not newborns, which was the last bit they'd had saved from the ceasefire, and they were having to give that to newborns, but they didn't have enough, so many of them died.
So what would the mothers do instead? Or would they just have to literally just wait for their baby to die?
Yeah, well, they were in the hospital trying to keep them alive, but they then just faded away and died, and it was awful. I didn't. Those 4 newborns, they died before I got there. But there was a little girl called Zainab who I used to go and see every day. She wasn't my patient because I'm not a paediatrician, but I was so upset by her. I used to go and visit her and try and talk to her mother who looked after her, and she and I showed photographs of her in my talk. She was 7 months old. She looked like she was a newborn, and you could see every little bone of her facial skeleton, her ribs and everything. And she was being fed with 10% dextrose, which is sugar water, basically. And she died 2 weeks into my trip there. And as you said, and just coming back to the point you're making about the border, I didn't try and take in any formula feed. I didn't know. I mean, we knew there was a massive problem with malnutrition, but we knew that everything would be we'd been told everything would be confiscated, so we didn't take that in. But some American doctors who came in about 4 days after me, 5 days after me, we'd sort of sent messages out on the, global medical networks of humanitarian doctors, whatever you want to call it. There are babies dying. We need formula feed. So some American doctors brought some formula feed in their luggage, and every single bottle of it was taken away by the Israeli border guards. Now, I remember when they described that to me, I'd only been up seeing Zainab an hour or two beforehand, and it was obvious she was going to die, maybe not that day. And realising, or just having it confirmed yet again, that the reason she was going to die, the reason she was dying and others were dying, was because the Israelis were not only refusing to allow any aid to come in, but were taking bottles of formula feed out of doctors' luggage so they couldn't be used to save these children's lives.
Knowingly.
No, it's absolutely, it's deliberate. I mean, absolutely deliberate. I mean, words defy me in trying to explain that.
And that's not one of those multi-usage that's baby formula.
No,
it's baby formula.
You're absolutely right. So we're told don't take any. They
Yeah.
will take anything that can be used possibly as a weapon. So we don't take in surgical instruments and all that sort of stuff for obvious reasons. But formula feed as a weapon, I mean, it defeats me completely. So it is absolutely impossible to think of any other reason for confiscating that other than deliberately trying to starve children to death.
And so you're just going back a little bit. So when you fly from the UK, you land in.
So, no. You can't. You fly into Amman in Jordan.
Okay.
So the first 2 trips we went to Cairo and then went overland through.
Rafah.
Well, yeah. So through the Sinai and through Rafah. But as you will remember, Rafah was destroyed and has been closed since May the 6th last year. So the only way of getting in, no one's been allowed to go in through Israel. I mean, the GHF teams went in through Israel. Of course, went in through
The ironically
Ben
named
Gurion,
Gaza
exactly.
Humanitarian
And
Foundation.
I'm sure some
But we go in.
specific journalists were.
Yeah, these are appalling right-wing
the
journalists
wonderfully
like
objective
Douglas
Murray
Murray and all those
yeah.
appalling people who say, I've seen what it's like. They go in escorted by IDF. Actually, I don't want to waste time on talking about those individuals. We go in, we fly into Amman, and then you go in a UN convoy from the Allenby Bridge across Israel till you get to the border and then go in through there. So that's how we get in. It's a long day's journey.
So there's no real sort of conversation connection with anyone specifically Israel associated until you reach the border, and then they
so
search
we
you
meet
and
them
allow
at
you in.
we meet soldiers at the Jordan Israel border.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's no conversations. They just check our permits, check we're on their list of approved people to go into Gaza. We then get back in the UN thing, go to the border with Gaza. They search our luggage again. They may or may not take things out. We take in lots of cigarettes and things for Gazan staff. the two things they want are coffee and cigarettes. So we take a lot of that in for them.
To smoke or as currency?
Well, it's a very good question, actually. I mean, so we took it in for the
Because it's famous in prisons.
Yeah. So it's a very good question. We take it in for the MAP Gazan staff. We do not take it in for all the others, or we're told not to, for precisely the reasons behind the implications of what you just said, is that it is used as currency. It foments discord and fighting and everything. So we're told only take stuff in for the MAP staff. I did take in things for friends of mine, just packets of cigarettes and things like that, but didn't, but handed them out very, very subtly.
The Gazan doctors?
Yeah, to people I know, because they all smoke. And I took coffee in because I knew because I'd been in touch, they wanted coffee.
That's really weird.
A packet of cigarettes in Gaza at the moment costs $400. That's how much you can buy a packet of cigarettes for on the little street markets. $400, $20 for one cigarette. So of course,
I saw one. What's his name? Mu'taz, the journalist.
Yeah.
He was saying he recently bought his grandmother some vegetables for $1,500.
Yeah, crazy.
It is crazy. I remember my wife recently. She was like hungry, and she goes, "Oh, I'm starving," and then she just stopped herself in her tracks. So how can you even say stuff like that anymore? To even what hunger? There's no hunger. It must recalibrate your mindset entirely on how you perceive everything around you.
Absolutely.
Once you get out,
it's crazy. So yeah, they're very restricted what you can take in. But we'd been forewarned, so we took very little stuff in.
This was your third time after October the 7th.
Yeah.
What was different about this time?
So I think that the two big differences, there are a lot of similarities. The incessant bombings, the explosive injuries, but the two big differences were the utterly awful malnutrition, which we've touched on, and we may well go back to that. Terrible malnutrition, both affecting people when they came into hospital, clearly, but also because we couldn't give them any nutritional support when they were recovering from their surgery. So that led to a very high mortality rate from operations that would have expected them to survive, or they would have had a good, decent chance of surviving. So that was a massive thing. And the second thing was the just appalling shootings of young teenage boys at the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation food distribution points. And that was, and not just the fact they were shooting young boys, teenagers, 11, 12, 13, 14, who'd gone. They were the strongest people in the family, so they were the ones sent by the family to get food, and they were being shot in the way we've described. And the first one I ever saw of that was, I think, my third or fourth day at Nasser. I was called into theatre to help some of the local surgeons because they had a 12-year-old boy on the operating table who had been shot at one of these food distribution sites, and he died on the table. We couldn't save him. He'd had such massive blood loss, it had damaged his heart as well. We couldn't save him, and there was a 12-year-old boy who was dead on the table.
Because you're a doctor, and doctors generally, they have, I don't know if you can use this word, they get used to death. Like my day-to-day life, your day-to-day life, Nabil's day-to-day life, we don't see death generally. Every now and then somebody in your family dies, or maybe like my grandmother passed away. This was like a big event in my life for my family, whereas as a doctor, routinely every now, as a junior doctor, especially on the wards and stuff, you must see people pass away and things. What was different about the deaths you saw in Gaza? Was it different? Does it stand out more to you than the other deaths you've seen throughout your life as a doctor?
It's a good question. You're right. You do get used to death. Is that
because even the way you're talking about, you said, "Oh, Zainab," and then she died. Like if I saw a child, I mean, because I'd only ever seen one, probably that would be, I'd be like completely shaken by that forever.
Tell you, I cried on many occasions in Gaza. I still cry when I think about it. When I got phoned up to say that Habiba had died, my 11-year-old little girl, who I was in floods of tears when I heard she'd died. So I still get very emotional. I get emotional thinking about it now. I was emotional the other night at that talk.
Of course, yeah.
But I've been very emotional as a doctor in Oxford when patients I've got to know well die. You're absolutely right. You do see a lot of death, and I think when you see death in people you don't know, of course it's desperately sad, but you just have to compartmentalize it and just carry on. It doesn't mean you feel very low afterwards. But I've cried with families of dead patients in Oxford who I've got to know well, people I've got to know very well during their course of treatment, often for cancer. And in Gaza, yes, you see a lot of dead bodies coming. You see a lot of people who die. It's horribly sad. But if you combine that with getting to know some of them, or even if they're little children, even if you don't know them, just talking to the families and seeing their distress, and it's unutterably awful.
And it's circumstances as well, isn't it? Because so those, the patients that you have in Oxford, they're likely cancer patients.
You're absolutely right.
They're likely a little bit older, and having experienced life and whatnot. But then you have, like you mentioned, a 12-year-old boy, 7-week-old girl,
all of his life left to live.
And they are very much, their life was taken.
Yeah, and so you're absolutely right. So part of that distress is anger as well. And you get and on so many occasions in Gaza you have this sort of really complex. We talked about it the other night, and particularly when you leave Gaza, but actually throughout the whole stay, these emotions fly through you all the time. So I hesitate to say you get used to death, but you are slightly conditioned to it. You're absolutely right, but it doesn't mean that you don't get very, very upset at times.
And in many ways, October, in those few weeks after October 7th, when the massive onslaught really did start, we saw lots of images, we saw lots of videos, and now we're 22, 23 months onwards, and we're still seeing those videos, and it's almost, for me, it's almost like a choice of, okay, I need to watch this to make sure that I still sort of stay connected, so it doesn't become too distant, and then I'm still remembering and I'm still doing everything that I can. But yeah, that becomes, you do almost get sort of desensitized to it, and then every now and again there might be something that really does bring you back in.
But it also, we've been seeing these scenes for 22 months now, and then you hear, I think it must have been on one of the television programs, Ed Balls, who used to be one of our senior politicians, talked about the unfolding humanitarian disaster in Gaza. I wanted to scream and say, what do you mean unfolding it? When did it start for you, Ed Balls? It started for me 22 months ago. It started for me on, June the 8th, on October the 8th. So why are we suddenly seeing a lot in the news now? Why didn't we see this repeatedly? Why weren't they listening to all the doctors and nurses who were talking about this? I was talking about it in January 2024. I was talking to the newspapers. I was talking to the television stations. I was talking to the politicians. I was telling everyone to listen. This is what's happening.
And this is what's going to happen.
And this is what's going to happen.
If you don't do anything.
This is what's going to happen. Oh, what a surprise. It's all happened.
Oh, no.
And yet it's an unfolding humanitarian disaster. Well, it's taken a long time to unfold, isn't it? Because it was unfolded 22 months ago, as far as I'm concerned.
That's so powerful.
Just going back a little bit, Molana asked you about what was different when you went before. So from when you went this time, you talk about malnutrition and I suppose the physical, what you can see and what sort of, I suppose, almost tangible. What was different in terms of emotions and feelings of the Gazans and how they are?
How are they feeling?
How are they sort of? Is there any reduction? Like, is there still hope? Is there still a sense of?
Also, I wanted to know how did they go day to day? Like, they must still want to hug your kids and play with them, and some semblance of normalcy in your life, even in this most dire of circumstances. Is there something of that still within them?
So they let's take a step back to normal Gaza again.
Yeah.
They, as we've said this before, but it's worth repeating, beautiful people, generous, resilient, resourceful, happy, hopeful. Hope. They were full of hope. And when I talked to them in October, November, December 23 and 24, when I was out there and talking to them, they were, a mixture of emotions there, but they were hopeful. They were hopeful the world was going to wake up and stop the Israelis. They couldn't understand why the West wasn't standing up, but they were hopeful they would. And I feel in a way terrible saying this, but I think a lot of that hope has died.
Okay.
And I've always sort of felt I've got to keep that hope, that optimism up, because my Gazan friends have got that hope and that optimism. And if they don't give up hope, how can we give up hope? But I don't know, I feel bad saying this, but so many of the people I spoke to say they want to get out. They want to get out. Their families are dying. Their
Because you'd
kids
rather
are
be in a
starving.
refugee camp in Egypt.
Yeah, having food and everything like that. That doesn't mean they don't want to come back the minute they can and rebuild. Of course they do. But I think they feel defeated. And I think this was the end game all along for Netanyahu.
That was always the plan.
It was never about defeating Hamas and security of Israel. It was about it was about ethnic cleansing. It was about genocide. It's about clearing all Gazans out of Palestine. And this sort of, this argument that these ridiculous right-wing commentators come out with and say, well, it can't be genocide because they wanted a genocide. They could have just dropped a nuclear bomb. Yeah. I mean, such a fatuous argument. The Israelis are cleverer than that. They want the world. They want to be able to tell the world, well, the Gazans chose to leave.
They want to make the world stand by and watch it happen.
Yeah, but they want, but rather than just send a nuclear bomb, they want the world to be able to see Gazans walking out of Gaza into Egypt. Well, they chose to leave. And so it was all about, yes, of course, killing a lot of them, but also about, it's why they've targeted the hospitals, it's why they've targeted the doctors, it's why they've destroyed the whole infrastructure of healthcare. They've destroyed the whole education system. They've destroyed all the mosques. They've destroyed the universities. They've destroyed the agricultural industry. They've destroyed the fishing industry. They've destroyed the desalination plants. They've destroyed the whole infrastructure of living in order to make the Gazans want to leave. And they're achieving that. And they target hospitals because displaced people migrate to hospitals. They see hospitals as a place of sanctuary. We know they're not that safe in Gaza, but they see them as a place of sanctuary. That's why when you go to these hospitals, when I went to Al-Aqsa a year and a half ago and couldn't believe my eyes, and there are 30,000 people living there, living in the grounds hospital know about. It's because they go there because they know they're going to need healthcare, so they'll live by the hospital. And when the hospital gets destroyed, they move on to the next place,
to the next hospital.
So that's one of the reasons why the Israelis have been targeting the hospitals, to destroy them, and they are succeeding because the Gazans want to get out.
We obviously Muslims, and Islam is a very central part of our love for Gaza and the people of Palestine, and one of the things we've seen over this last 22 months is, for example, when Ramadan comes, they try to fast still to carry out the religious rituals. Still, when the Eid day comes, they try to pray the Eid prayer in their non-existent mosques. The call to prayer, I don't know how much of it still goes on. There were still attempts of, like, in these, you'd see them in derelict buildings trying to give the call to prayer, just, to hold on to their Islamic faith as much as they possibly could. Do you have any reflections on that? Did you see what was the relationship of them to their Islam, and then at the same time, what could you see them trying to hold on to that as much as possible?
Absolutely, that's one of the most impressive things. I didn't see it. I'm not a religious person, but I've been in awe of their faith in Gaza, and actually it's one of the things I talked about earlier about how wonderful it's been getting to know some Muslim communities and seeing how wonderful that faith is. But I was blown away by the retention of their faith and how much strength that gave them in Gaza. It is unreal. I really mean that. It was wonderful to behold, and I didn't see any reduction in that whatsoever.
Like a despondency, or God has forsaken
I
us.
didn't see. I mean, I didn't have a lot of conversation about that, but I saw everyone. Everyone was praying. My wonderful Gazan medical friends who were starving, were hungry, were going back to their tents to try and get food for their children. They were still praying regularly. It was beautiful to behold.
One of the things that you spoke about in that talk that you gave that was quite harrowing and really shook me personally is some of the experiences medical doctors are having now in Gaza. There was a document you also spoke of that some doctors have collected all of the crimes that have been committed. It's not for the shock factor. I don't want people to think we're doing this as some sort of
No, but it needs to get out there.
It needs to
so
be
that
said.
was about, I mean, expanding the theme of what I've been talking about, the targeting of the healthcare system. They've bombed the hospitals, they've destroyed the hospitals, they've destroyed every ultrasound machine in Shifa, they destroyed every dialysis machine, they destroyed the water supplies, the gas supplies, each scanner, every laboratory, to completely disable the healthcare system. But they've also targeted the doctors and the nurses, and they've killed well over 1,500 healthcare workers, including friends of mine. They've executed many of them. So there've been people, two doctors I knew, who were found with dead, hands handcuffed behind their backs with bullet wounds in their head. Many examples of that. So that's not collateral damage. That's not, that is execution. And when the Gazan healthcare workers went back into Shifa last year, it having been taken over by the Israeli ground forces, they found 300 bodies, all of whom had been shot. So they're war crimes, of course they are, but they've also abducted and illegally detained. I think the figure now is over 500 healthcare workers, again, including people I know, including people I took testimonies from, including people I worked with a few weeks ago in Nasser Hospital, people who have been imprisoned. I mean, Abu Hussam Safia has been imprisoned, I think, for 9 months now, isn't it? I think. But I knew people who'd been in prison for 2-3 months, and they described to me in great detail how they'd been tortured, how they'd been beaten every single day, sometimes 12 hours non-stop, broken bones, they were blindfolded, they were handcuffed behind their back, their genitals were electrocuted, they were told their families had been murdered. One of them was a father who told his children had been killed. They had the most appalling injuries, and I talked in that very harrowing section of the talk about Dr. Adnan Al-Bursh, who was a very well-known orthopedic surgeon in Gaza. I only met him once. I didn't know him well. Friends of mine knew him unbelievably well, and he was killed under torture. He was raped to death in an Israeli prison. So the catalogue of types of torture being used is documented in great detail in the Healthcare Workers Watch document, which you can look up on the internet. I couldn't bring myself to read that slide out because it showed such depravity in the modes of torture being used. And one of the things I found most distressing about that was the very, very clear evidence of Israeli healthcare workers either turning a blind eye and allowing it to happen, and in some circumstances taking part in the torture.
So much for the Hippocratic Oath.
Yeah. So
And this isn't rogue soldiers or a group of soldiers that, you know, have decided that they're going to exact their own kind of revenge or anything. This is institutionalized. This is systemic. This is across the board.
that is what it would appear to be like. Absolutely. I mean, it's happening on such a scale that it's impossible to believe it's the occasional rogue soldier.
When the doctors go missing, there's 500 health workers. Who steps? You've talked. Is it these students you're talking about? These students you go and teach. Is it young people, first year? I don't know. It's like first year medical students suddenly have to become consultant surgeons overnight now to help serve their communities in Gaza, to fill the gap of the healthcare workers that
Absolutely. We talked about the medical students learning there. There are medical students in ER sewing up wounds, completing amputations. Absolutely. One of the doctors who I worked very closely with in my most recent trip, he was a third-year resident trainee, so basically halfway through his surgical training. Mohammed Oka, a truly beautiful young man, just a wonderful man, wonderful doctor, compassion, empathy. He, before October 2023, he had just started learning how to open the abdomen and close the abdomen for operations. And when I was with him over this last month, he had done at that stage, I think, 390 emergency abdominal operations for trauma. That's far more than I have ever done. And I've been a consultant surgeon for 30 years. Just the most staggering amount of work and the steep and learning curve, and they've become so accomplished at this sort of surgery.
This is while being malnourished, living in a tent,
whilst being malnourished,
bombed,
whilst being
trying
bombed,
to stay alive, and
whilst having family members
looking
killed.
after family,
but they do it. So they learn at a very young age. You know, as I said, I did this exam for the medical students. They were fourth year medical students. They'd done 1 year of clinical work, and yet most of them got full marks in the trauma station. They just know because they've seen so much of it. So they learn very quickly. And as you say, medical students doing minor operations and things like that.
One of the interesting things you spoke about is the hierarchy. That as Western doctors, you come in, there's still this idea that the Palestinian doctors lead the way in the way things. So even though you're an Oxford trained, you lecturer at Oxford University, once you go there, are you just like another hand on deck to help?
Yeah, I think it's. I wanted to make that point because I think it's so important. It's a sort of, and we have to. It's a sort of the decolonization of aid that we give to Gaza and other countries. And I've seen this work very badly. I've seen NGOs go in and do the opposite. And on many occasions over the years, I've been going to Gaza long before October 2023, but I've seen it since then, of people going out there, you know, being undoubtedly one of the highest trained neurosurgeons or whatever, or cancer surgeons in the world. And I'm going to go there, I'm going to do this amazing operation. I'm going to save this boy's life. And I am my daughter calls it white saviorism, I think, is the term for it. And
then make sure there's some nice photos taken.
Yeah, absolutely. And there are some NGOs who do that. I won't name them because I'll get into trouble. But there are some NGOs...
But not medical aid for Palestinians, who you should donate to in the description below.
Bloody brilliant. But there are some NGOs who do that. There are people who do very little work out there, and they just they have photographs, they do selfies all the time, or videos they send back to their stations in America, saying I'm here. So I'm pretty appalled by that. The map philosophy, as I said before, is not like that at all. It's and what I was saying the other night was the importance of embracing the culture. And you will fail if you do not embrace the culture. So you don't go there as a highly trained Oxford surgeon. You go there knowing that you'll almost certainly learn far more then you'll give to them. Don't get me wrong, of course we give to them, and of course I helped in some of the more complex stuff, but God, they were much better at these emergency laparoscopies there, because they've done thousands in the last year and a half. But it wasn't just about that. So you've got to go out there, prepare, you're there to help them. And this isn't just about dealing with the trauma now, it's the rebuilding is they have to be in charge. They are the ones leading the recovery. They will be the ones. We're there to help, and they need our help. My God, they need our help. But they need to lead it. They need to decide how to do it.
Is there a discernible difference in how Israel treats Palestinian doctors versus Western doctors? Because I know you talked about you have like a safe house and you get permission so they know you're there. And generally, I mean, I don't know if this is true, you can correct me if I'm wrong, it does seem like they try not to target international aid workers. The few times they have hit them, the uproar has been so magnificent. I think there's a conversation about inherent racism and things as well there, maybe as well.
I think that there's no doubt there's a thing called a deconfliction process in Gaza, whereby whenever there's any movement of foreign healthcare workers or humanitarian aid workers, that the movement plans have to be discussed with Kogat, which is the liaison branch of the Israeli army, and they tell you what areas are safe and what aren't safe. Now, clearly, there's some very well-known occasions when that's broken down, like the Grand Central Kitchen, and indeed Al-Aqsa Hospital. When I was there in January last year, was bombed.
You were in the hospital?
I was in the hospital. I was in the operating theatre when there was a missile attack on the intensive care unit, the building next door, just literally next door. NASA Hospital was bombed back in March, I think it was, when friends of mine were in the hospital 2 stories above. So all the hospitals have been attacked when foreign doctors have been there. The house I was living in the safe house I was living in my first trip there in Al Mawasi, that was bombed. Not when I was there, we'd left, but 5 days after we left, when there was another UK team in there, it was bombed and they were all asleep, including Gazan healthcare workers, including 2 small children. No one killed,
Thank God.
but all sustained shrapnel damage and stuff like that. So the deconfliction process doesn't work very well, but I think there's something in what you say, because of course statistically I think there's been 1 British aid worker killed, no foreign doctors have been killed, and yet we know that over 1,500 Gazan doctors have been killed. So there's beyond any doubt clearly been a targeted killing of Gazan healthcare workers. There clearly is, Kogat, I think, does work to try and protect British or foreign doctors, but
is that more fear of like international uproar?
Probably, yes, because
Professor Nick Maynard from Oxford University.
I think so, probably, because I certainly wouldn't claim that they're doing it out of any moral reasons at all. But
they're the most moral army in the world.
Yeah, absolutely. Don't we know it?
You talked about, I'm assuming while you were there, the malnutrition. Did you feel it yourself while you were there? What were you eating? What were you?
I ate rice every day, and that was it for 4 weeks.
Where would it come from?
So they managed to get stores of rice. So MAP managed to, you can buy things in Gaza. You just got to pay them money for it. So MAP would pay to get us some food, but it was very basic. We basically had 1 meal a day of rice. We had no fruit, no vegetables, no protein. We had occasional lentils if they could get hold of some. So it was very basic. Listen, I'm not complaining. We still had more than most people in Gaza. I lost 6 kilograms in weight in 4 weeks, which my wife was quite pleased about. But that was because so there was very limited food even for us. But we still had considerably more than the locals. I took in, we talked earlier about what we took in luggage. I took in quite a bit of stuff for myself. So some high protein meals and bars and things like that, some coffee and things like that. I actually gave virtually all of it away because when I got there, I could see, there's a very close friend of mine called Hamis who lives in Gaza City. I haven't seen him. I speak to him all the time. He's my oldest friend in Gaza. I met him in 2010. He's living in northern Gaza with his wife and children. Last year, at one point, they were living on animal feed alone. He's lost, 20, 30 kilograms. Anyway, they're starving in the north. So I managed to find someone I knew who was going to be travelling to the north. So I just gave it all to him to take to my friend Hamis, and all the money I'd managed to bring in. Because
was he a doctor? Is he a doctor?
He's a doctor. Yeah, he's a wonderful doctor, who he was in that talk you went to the other night. I don't know if you remember at the beginning. I talked about a hospital which had been blown up in 2014, the Al Wafa Rehabilitation Hospital, and that was Hamis who used to run this hospital.
That was his hospital.
So we had very little food.
Meaning that there's like a leveling, isn't there? It doesn't matter whether you're a doctor, a millionaire before all of this happened. Everybody's now just scrambling for anything they can possibly find to just feed their families, feed themselves.
It is absolutely. Everyone is scrabbling around trying to find it.
And there's, how many thousands of aid trucks are just waiting and not being allowed in.
Yeah. And it's the Israelis. I know they're peddling this ludicrous suggestion that it's the United Nations preventing that. UNRWA had a very good system for distributing food. They had 408 food distribution points. It worked. When the Israeli military allowed it to work, it worked. Of course, the Israeli military tried to stop it all the time, but it worked. And they've replaced that with this appalling militarized system which kills people. And as you say, there are hundreds of trucks waiting there to be allowed in.
And just to go back to that point, it's all very, very specific. It's very targeted. It's very purposeful in terms of breaking down UNRWA and just now running that, the aid centres themselves, or, running in inverted commas, however they want to run it. But it's very, very specific. It's very purposeful in terms of the end goal will end up being people will have to leave if they need to stay alive.
But we've played into their game. When I say we, I mean our governments, our media. Look at the way they reported on UNRWA. Look at the Western governments defunding UNRWA.
Yep.
They've played their game.
And then USAID, the defunding of USAID, because isn't it the malnutrition? They have special peanut butter. There's a very special pack you get for people who are malnourished. You know this better.
Yeah. These sort of fortified food. They're called therapeutic foods.
I read an article about it, but apparently because of the USAID cuts, they're just lying in warehouses and nobody's claiming them, and people need them. They've never needed them more.
Absolutely.
And nobody's getting them. Talking about governments, and I don't know if you want to touch on that, like the press. Obviously, you're there, you're watching all of these horrors unfold in front of your eyes. You come back, you see. But we have seen it. There's obviously now there's a turning. There is this sort of suddenly everybody's developed a moral conscience. What's the right-wing paper that came out quite strongly a couple of days in a row? Was it the Telegraph?
I think it was the Express.
Express? Suddenly, this needs to...
The Telegraph's gone that far.
Okay. And they're like, things have now, this is the end and this and that. But you guys have been warning about this for months. So this is the inevitable conclusion of this is going to be mass starvation, ethnic cleansing, genocide, whatever. And they've ignored it. Now suddenly... is there a pretense? Are they pretending to care?
So you're absolutely right, and let's take it at face value. Let's be grateful.
Yes,
I'm going to come back to a lot of criticism, but let's be grateful for the moment that there is some positive press, what are you going to call it, that they're now calling it all out. But let us not pretend that we will ever forget that it's taken them 22 months to do that. They have been complicit for 22 months, and once. Hopefully this is over, once Gaza is being rebuilt, once they're being fed, all those who have been silent or have been complicit must be held to account. We won't forget the fact that the media suddenly at 22 months suddenly decided to try and report it. We won't forget the fact that commentators on television programs have announced 22 months later this humanitarian tragedy which is now unfolding. We won't forget that Keir Starmer and David Lammy and David Cameron and Rishi Sunak and Andrew Mitchell effectively supported this genocide. And the fact that, one of the things I talked earlier about, having anger is one of these emotions I have. I mean, I keep it under control, don't worry, but I feel intense anger. And one of the first things I saw on the news 2 or 3 days after I left Gaza was David Lammy, our former secretary, our foreign secretary, in the United Nations building in New York. And he was standing there at the podium with the world watching, saying, "I feel the hands of history on my shoulders," when he was announcing that Britain was going to recognise Palestine as its own state.
In September with the conditions.
Yeah, but then that's the point. So, again, let's take that at face value. Great. I mean, you should have done it years ago, of course, but let's just be generous and say, well, that's great. But then they put conditions upon it. I mean, that is just bizarre and extreme. I mean, I cannot begin to fathom that. So no one will see through that. These words are worthless. It's not going to make any difference to the starving people in Gaza, the fact that
in 2 months' time,
Britain has conditionally agreed to it being a state of Palestine. Where are our British government, where are our Prime Minister and our Foreign Secretary publicly stating they recognise a genocide is being carried out? Where are they saying they recognise there are war crimes? Why are they still allowing arms to go to Israel?
Or sending arms.
Sending arms. They're sending them. The parts of the F-35 jets. Why are they still allowing RAF reconnaissance flights over Gaza every day? Why are they still allowing all the trade deals to go ahead? They try and pull the wool over our eyes by announcing they're suspending discussions about the next trade deal, but they've still got vast numbers of trade deals going on. Why have they not publicly stated that if someone who has been charged as a war criminal by the International Criminal Court, why have they not stated if those individuals, i.e. Netanyahu and Gallant, come onto British land, why haven't they announced they would uphold international law and arrest them as they are legally obliged to do? And they haven't agreed to that. I mean, I could go on for hours like this, but this slightly stronger rhetoric coming out of them isn't going to fool anyone. Let's say we're glad they're saying it, but it will not fool me. It won't fool anyone that this is pure political gesturing and nothing else. And until they start saying things that really matter and start taking actions to really, really try and sort this out, that's when we'll start taking them seriously.
And what do you feel like your role is in that, to try to persuade them and try to push them? Because again, we were talking earlier about you tweeted at Starmer and Lammy, I'm back, I want to have a conversation. Are they...
Well, he's mentioned obviously he's meeting Lammy's number 2.
Yeah, I was going to say, is that going to happen? And
I don't know, and I still hope. I mean, I know there are. I know there are some discussions going ahead about possibly meeting even more senior people. I'll wait and see, and I'll let you know if it does happen.
Because wasn't the former director or the is it CEO of MAP that is now a MP in Labour MP?
Absolutely. It was quite damaging for MAP that last year.
Okay.
MAP's really come through that though, and is.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah. I don't know. I can't remember the name, but.
So as Melanie Ward, she was the chief executive of MAP, and she stood for Parliament as on Keir Starmer's mandate. Really is
which is Israel has the right to shut off.
So that caused a lot of upset. MAP have moved on, and they've
clarified their own position.
Terrific interim CEO. They've now got a terrific new CEO started, and MAP's really come through that.
Yes,
but it was very damaging. You're absolutely right. But we need actions from them, and I will go and see them if I get a chance. I genuinely believed a year and a half ago when I went to see Lord Cameron and Andrew Mitchell, I genuinely believed it would make a difference, and I think that just shows that I'm pretty naive, because I don't think it made a blind bit of difference. And I the fact that if we do get a chance to meet them, I will go there armed with
Facts, statistics.
facts, but I'll go armed with colour photographs of dead children, of burnt children, of awful deaths of people I've operated on who've died. I will go and I'll put them under their noses that this is what is happening. This is what your government has been silent on.
Or worse.
And these are our expectations of what we think you should be doing.
And I mean, there's always been a sense of urgency, but now, especially with the malnourishment, it's incredibly urgent. Like, again, from your experience, your estimations, how much longer are people, if it carries on like this, you know, you talked about your friend losing 20, 30 kilograms. That's not sustainable.
I
if there's
fear,
a limited amount of food.
So I think it's too late. I think it's too late. I think that Netanyahu's announcement, I suspect he realizes that the Western governments are beginning to are certainly changing their tone of voice. Now, I don't believe for a second that it's because Keir Starmer or David Lammy or Emmanuel Macron have suddenly thought, oh my God, how terrible, we've got to stop this. They're doing it because they want to be seen to be eventually on the right side of history.
Mm-hmm.
They see world opinion as changing. They see that it's becoming impossible not to criticize Israel, and they want to be ultimately able to say, well, I stood up and I did what I can. But none of us will forget. History will record how silent they've been. But that won't stop all of us doing our absolute best to try and persuade them. And I don't think they'll change that. I don't think will affect the way they feel about it, but they react to public opinion. They react to things that may affect them, and that's if they lose votes or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So this is part of what I believe the pressure we can all build up against our politicians, again, to try and use whatever mechanisms we can to make them change.
To bring you back to Gaza and to sort of start bringing this conversation to a close as well, I think one of the most emotional moments for you was the farewell, the departure from Gaza. Now, you actually showed us a video of your own thoughts in that moment. You recorded them. I don't know if there's a way that we can get that sent to us.
I'll
maybe
send it to you and you can put it on the end of the podcast if you want.
We can upload that too.
We're back at the guest house early on Tuesday morning. They had to evacuate the other guest house, so they've got 6 families now living in this place. We're just here to transfer luggage into another car, and we're going to the Opera guest house. Huge emotions leaving NASA Hospital. Very emotional saying goodbye. I feel very emotional now, actually. I don't know what to say really. Very emotional saying goodbye to everyone. Tears. God willing, I'll see them all again. I can't wait to get home, but terribly sad to leave here. Terribly sad to leave my friends, my patients. Oh God, anyway. Crazy emotions, they really are. Anyway.
But could you maybe share some reflections on, there's 2 things here. One is you leaving Gaza yourself, your own thoughts, but the Gazans leave Gaza as well. And you mentioned, I think she's like a goddaughter to you.
Inas, yeah.
They must have this feeling in their heart still that they've left Gaza and there's family still there. So for yourself and the Gazans who've left, what's the emotional turmoil that's going on?
So it is an emotional turmoil. You're absolutely right. I mean, and I'll talk about the emotions I went through the day we left Gaza. We were told the night before we weren't going to get out, that it was going to be delayed, and that was very upsetting. Then we were told we could get out. So there's a great joy, great relief that you're going to be able to get out and go home. You feel enormous guilt, because you feel guilty that you're happy about going home. You feel guilt about leaving and your friends can't leave. That leads to you planning immediately when you're next going to come back. And that goes on every day. You feel this almost incredible physical need to go back. I met up with a very close friend of mine the other night, on Monday night. He came for dinner. He's a surgeon. He was one of my trainees for years. He's going to Gaza in 2 weeks' time. I felt this sort of physical jealousy of him going back in. I don't want to go back in now because I don't think I'd be able to cope with it emotionally and everything, but I felt this physical jealousy that he's going in. You feel immense sadness about saying goodbye to your friends, your colleagues there, your patients who you know may not survive, your friends who you may know may be killed. And that's, of course, mixed up with the guilt you feel. And you feel immense anger as well. And that's been a very dominant emotion for all the reasons we've just talked about, that the world is allowing this to happen. But the most dominant emotion at that time is distress at leaving. And it's very upsetting. And there were tears leaving. There were tears when I was doing that video. There were tears, clearly tears when I saw my wife again, but tears about missing Gaza. A lot of tears when I heard that Habiba, my little 11-year-old patient, had died.
Do you want to talk about her? Because I know you spoke about Zainab in a bit of detail. Was it Habiba?
Yeah, so Habiba was an 11-year-old girl who was blown up in a bomb in a tent. She was taken to a field hospital. She had chest injuries. There's not a criticism because they didn't have any resources there, but they failed to diagnose the fact that she had a bad esophageal injury. And so she was transferred to Nasser. And she came to the paediatric surgeons, and they had no experience of dealing with those complex injuries. So they asked me to be involved because that's my main specialty. So I saw her, mid-evening, and she was really sick. She had 2 big holes in her esophagus. She was leaking stomach contents into her chest. They were bathing her lungs and heart and stomach contents and all that sort of stuff. She was desperately sick, and
Was she in a lot of pain?
She was in a lot of pain, septic, struggling to breathe, not enough. It was awful. Anyway, so she clearly needed to go to theatre urgently. So I spent the whole of that night operating on her, reconstructing her esophagus, draining all the infection, all that sort of stuff. And I know that if she'd been in England, in my hospital, she would have had a 97-98% chance of surviving. There was a very small chance she would have done, but 97-98% chance of surviving. Maybe 95%, but very high. And they weren't used to dealing with esophageal problems. So I was up there a lot, helping them work, managing her. But we couldn't get the right nutrition for her. I knew she wouldn't be able to eat and drink for many, many weeks, so I'd put a feeding tube into her intestine to feed her through. We couldn't get the right nutrition for her. Eventually we found some, by which time it had been a week since she'd had any nutrition at all, and her gut, her intestines couldn't tolerate it. She developed something called refeeding syndrome, which is what happens when you've been starved and you introduce food again, and your blood chemistry goes completely mad and they can become very sick. So you have to feed them intravenously. And in Gaza, there's no intravenous feeding whatsoever. So she couldn't get nutrition. Despite all that, she seemed to be improving. I had one conversation with, I spoke to her before I operated when she was confused. I had another conversation when she was getting better. I spoke to her father every day. I left loads of instructions with my colleagues there. Really detailed instructions. We were planning on having a video call every single day to discuss her management. I was back in the UK, and we spoke at length. And about 3 days after I got back, I got a very distressed phone call saying she'd died. And that was very upsetting for me. A lot of tears. I feel very, very emotional talking about it now.
Was that because she was your patient and you feel like you could, if you were there, you could have done something? Or
it's-
was it something else?
It was the same emotions that I've just described to you. So terrible distress, a sadness, but guilt that I hadn't been there for her. That doesn't reflect on the magnificence of the care they were trying to provide her, but they didn't have the experience. So a lot of guilt that I'd left her, appalling anger. I got messages from my Gazan friends, one of them from Muhammad, this beautiful resident who worked with me. I could see in his words that he was crying when he sent it, because he said, I feel so bad. I've let you down, Dr. Nick. I've let you down. I promised you I'd look after Habib, and I've let you down. And I feel like crying now, actually. I'm not going to cry, but I feel very emotional. And that was really tough for them, for me, for her, clearly for her family. I mean, Christ. So the whole experience was awful, actually. But, you know, that's been replicated thousands upon thousands of times for everyone else there. And it's what's so evil about what's going on there.
One of the things you mentioned, one of the things I've heard from other doctors when they give their reflections is this overwhelming sense of guilt. It's always these micro moments where they could have done something. There was a doctor who was saying the woman, she was on the floor, she said, help me. And he was helping another patient. By the time he turned around, she'd passed away. And then he was like, what if I could have helped her and I didn't? And it really affected him. He says it still haunts him. And obviously you mentioned one of the most interesting slides I found in your presentation was how you deal with this. It's like, I don't want to get all like Instagram thingy, but you know, the self-care routine that you have to sort of make sure you maintain your own sanity and keep your spiritual well-being to the best of your ability.
Yeah, that was the first talk. I mean, I've given lots of lectures. The first talk, I put that slide in, actually, because I made it that day, because I thought I need to share what I've learned from these trips and what other friends of mine have learned. And as we said, this is my third trip out there. After my first trip, I thought, I don't know. I was going to say I thought I was sort of immune to all of that, and of course I wasn't. It was a ridiculous thing to think, but I didn't think I'd be
stoic British.
Yeah.
I didn't type thing.
Exactly. I thought, oh, I'll be all right, and and I wasn't. And then after my second trip, I knew I wouldn't be all right, and I knew then it wouldn't happen straight away. It would happen weeks later, and of course it did. And I felt I had a really bad time. I don't want to. I don't mind talking a bit about it, but I don't want to overplay this, because of course it's nothing compared to what they go through in Gaza. But I'll just be upfront and honest. I had a bad time at the end of last year, physically and emotionally, and I went to see someone for some counselling, and it was a huge help. And I when I announced to Fanula, my wife, that I was not announced, when I discussed with her that I wanted to go back.
It's on camera, isn't it?
Exactly. and it was a genuine discussion, because I knew I knew I'd have a blessing, but I knew she'd be very, very worried. But we talked about the fact that I'd been unwell the last time, and I hadn't really looked after myself physically and all that sort of thing. So I made her a promise that I would do everything I could, and that involved, as much as possible, eating as healthy, but you can't do that. But I took lots of supplements that we chose together, and I did take those. I took all the protein, which I then just gave away, but she understood that. So I wanted to make a point about that. And what I learned, sorry, I'm rambling a lot.
No, please.
I learned, the importance of maintaining your physical health, the importance of trying to eat as healthily as possible and taking supplements. So I did, keeping hydrated all the time. I drank loads of water. Resting when you can. I used to feel guilty if I wasn't in the operating theatre, trying to save lives. If I'd gone back for a rest, I thought, oh God, I should be doing this. It's crazy that you've got to, and I learnt this from my Gazan friends. They said, you just got to rest when you can. So that's why I put that bit in. And then what I forgot to say, of course, was the very, very first thing on the list is listen to your wife, which actually to me was very, very important. I told her afterwards I meant to put in selectively after that, but no, that was very important, and it made a big difference to me this trip. I did get ill. Every single one of us got ill with bad viral infections, but actually, physically, I think I was much better after the trip because of all those things.
Would you
I
ring your
did.
family every single day?
Yeah, I did, but we were able to because we had good Wi-Fi. We previous trips we sometimes had very bad Wi-Fi, so we couldn't. But and Fanula understands me very well, and she knows that I couldn't talk on some evenings. I did talk. I'd phone her up and say, "Listen, I'm just phoning to say hello and I love you. I can't talk." And she'd know what that would mean. She'd know I'd be too upset to talk. She'd know that means I'd start crying if I started talking about what I was seeing. And there were many evenings like that.
I know you mentioned you're not religious, and I promise I'm not about to start preaching to you, but there must have been moments when you see the Gazans around you retreating into their faith, giving them solace. They have this notion that God is in complete control, what we call in tawakkul, reliance on God, the fact that they're still praying, trying to maintain their connection to who we believe is the divine creator of the universe. Did you have any moments where you started to think about, like, I don't know, like more religious, deeper questions and things? Or
I don't think so, no. So, and I don't know how this happens. My sister's very religious. She's a lay preacher. She sent me messages every day saying that her congregation were praying for me every single day. My best friend's wife is religious. She sent me messages saying she's praying for me. That meant, I can't describe how much that meant to me. I've said to you already how in awe I am of my friends in Gaza who were praying. I mean, I was one of maybe 2 or 3 white doctors volunteering. All the others were Muslims, and they were all praying a lot. And I used to sit and watch them. And I said, "Do you mind if I sit?" There's a balcony there. And they said, no. They'd put their prayer mats out. And I sometimes said, "Do you want me to go? Do you want me to go?" And they said, no, absolutely not. And I used to watch them and listen to them, and I thought it was lovely. I thought it was wonderful. It was more than lovely. It was wonderfully impressive. And I was going to say I was envious. I don't know if I was envious or whether I was just in awe of them. So I guess I thought it was beautiful to watch. I haven't had anything that draws me further than that. Maybe I will, I don't know, but I haven't yet.
So this is now the point where we... No, I'm joking. I realise obviously we have to now bring this conversation to a close. I don't know if Nabil has a question. Do you want to ask a question yourself? Because you're the head honcho here.
It was just when you were giving the account of...
Do you need a mic? Do you want to, can people hear you?
That's a good point. Hear me now. Is harrowing accounts anymore?
I would beg them to carry on because I think they have to. I think you're right. I think it's a really good question. And I think people... I get some people just get so horrified by it. I guess some of them just lose interest. Some of them don't care. But I think these horrible things continue to happen. And I think I would urge people, people always ask me, what can they do? And I think there are some people who just stay silent. And I think that's very sad in a way that they can't respond. I guess that's their prerogative. But I struggle to understand why every single person in the world isn't standing up for the Gazans. I mean, have no understanding whatsoever why some of our well-known right-wing commentators are, despite having seen the incontrovertible evidence, are still calling it out as lies, and some of them publicly calling me and Dr. Rosie and others liars. I mean, it's just ludicrous, isn't it? But I would urge people just to listen. Everyone can do something. Listen to what people like me and other doctors are saying. Spread the word. Tell them. Force yourself to look at these things, because you have to. It's going on. It's happening to these people. You can't do it all the time. I have to force my wife to switch off her phone at times. And I say, right, I'll say we're having a Gaza-free 2 hours, or we're going to watch some sort of rubbish on television, and do that just for our own mental health. But then you've got to turn it back on again. You've got to watch what's happening and spread the word. Go and march. Go and talk about what's going on. Go and protest. Make sure everyone knows. Go to your work. Go to your colleagues and say, I watched this the other. I heard a story about little Habiba, an 11-year-old girl who should be out there playing with her siblings, and instead she's dead because of what Israel's done to them.
I think that's a very powerful way to bring this to a close. I do want to mention that I did want to bring up the King Charles point, that part of this shift in the narrative is that you were recently awarded a humanitarian medal. I don't know what the official term is. Knighthood soon, maybe, so Professor Maynard. But right at this point in time, you received a humanitarian medal from King Charles, who you said seemed quite very concerned about what's happening. So there is a shift in the tide that's happening.
Yeah, and that's what that meant to me more than anything, is the fact that it's almost, I mean, this was 6 months ago, so,
okay.
And it was a great honour, and it was a great honour, of course it was, but the most important thing by far was the fact that this was the first time, frankly, I'd seen any almost official recognition of what's going on in Gaza.
By the royal family?
By anyone. It certainly wasn't being recognised by our senior politicians at all. It certainly wasn't being recognised by our universities, our medical institutions, our hospitals, our royal colleges. They were all just silent about it. You know, I mean, I don't do this to get recognition from my hospital trust. I couldn't give two hoots about what they say, frankly. And I think much the worse of them for the fact they've been silent. But, you know, when I look at how our medical institutions, our universities, our hospital trusts, our media, our governments, when I look at the double standards and the hypocrisy comparing their response to Gaza and their response to Ukraine, it's just, you know, and I applaud everything they've done for Ukraine. Of course, that's an appalling conflict, but they've done nothing like that for Gaza. So to me, getting the humanitarian medal was a great personal honour, but much more important than that, it was official recognition, at least from the royal family, that there are appalling things going on in Gaza and that we are recognising that, you know, almost something needs to be done about it. That's what it meant to me.
Thank you so much, Professor Maynard, for joining us today. We're hoping we don't have to have you on again after another trip and another more harrowing account. We really hope, I mean, we're hearing news at the moment that Netanyahu's about to launch a full-scale offensive occupation of Gaza. We have no idea what this means. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, maybe even. I know it's literally breaking news, and maybe it's a bit unfair for me to ask.
No. I mean, I'm not surprised, and that's the tragic thing about it. But it fills me with unbelievable dread for what it means for my friends in Nasser Hospital at the moment, my friends living in Gaza City, my friends all over Gaza. You know, when I say goodbye to them, I get upset thinking they may be dead soon, and I don't know. I'm desperately upset at the prospect of what's going to happen to them, and we're allowing it to happen. When I say we, I mean
our government
allowing it to happen.
God willing, inshallah. I ask all of our viewers, I think this is probably one of the most important podcasts or videos that we've released on our channel. If you've managed to make it this far, which I hope you have, please like, share, subscribe to the channel, share this video with as many people as you can. I do feel like this is one of the most detailed accounts that we have from a medical doctor, the length, the detail that we went into. Most accounts are usually much shorter, 8-minute TV interviews. This is a very detailed account. Share this with as many people as you can. Spread the word, and then obviously in the description there will be a link to donate to MAP. Donate to them as much as you possibly can. Donate to our Muslim brothers and sisters. Donate very, very generously. If you're not a Muslim, it doesn't matter. Donate as much as you can, or whatever money you have. Maybe don't take that holiday you want to take this month, take it next month. Whatever it is, give whatever you can to them. And we once again thank Professor Nick Maynard for his time. It's been a bittersweet conversation. It's incredible to speak to you, but it's also the topic of conversation is obviously a very difficult one. And so we pray, and as we've been praying for you as well, for yourself, that God keeps you under his protection and that your family is well, and and the blessings of God keep raining down upon you and your family, and that one day together we will meet together to record a podcast in a free Palestine, just reminiscing about those conversations we once had and looking to hopeful days ahead.
Inshallah.
Inshallah.
Thank you very much for having me, and it's been a real delight to meet you again and join you down here again. So thank you.
Thank you.